New York City, you've got over 8.3 million people, 32,000 streets, and a skyline that literally defines the very idea of a global metropolis. But 400 years ago, this wasn't a forest of steel and glass. It was an island of actual forests. So how did a tiny, isolated trading post on the edge of a vast wilderness evolve into the world's most influential city? Welcome to the Explorer. Today we're going to peel back the layers of concrete to find the heartbeat of a city that has reinvented itself 1,000 times over.
8.3 million. That's the staggering number of people living in today's concrete jungle. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around, right? I mean, imagine standing right in the middle of Midtown Manhattan just a few centuries ago. You wouldn't hear the roar of yellow cabs or see a single skyscraper. Instead, you'd be standing in this dense, natural oak and hickory forest. You'd be surrounded by crystal-clear streams and marshlands just absolutely teeming with wildlife. To really understand New York, we first have to understand what it was before all that concrete was poured.
Long before the first European sail even appeared on the horizon, this place was known as Mannahattata, a breathtaking landscape carved out by retreating glaciers roughly 13,000 years ago. For over 10,000 years, around 15,000 Lenape people lived here in absolute harmony with the land. They utilized the rich waterways that would eventually make this island the center of the world. Then, the Dutch show up, and this famous transaction goes down in 1626. Peter Minuit reportedly purchases Manhattan for 60 guilders, which is roughly $1,000 today. But here's the catch. These two cultures had completely incompatible views on what owning land actually meant. To the Lenape, land was a shared, temporary resource for seasonal hunting and farming. But to the Europeans, it was permanent, owned real estate to be bought and sold. That one fundamental misunderstanding set the stage for literally everything that followed.
Section 2. For the greatest harbor. So, in 1609, Henry Hudson finds the river that now bears his name, and by 1624, the Dutch West India Company establishes New Amsterdam right at the southern tip of Manhattan. They were drawn there by that incredible deep-water harbor, mostly to get in on the highly lucrative beaver fur trade. But the Dutch era? Well, it was colorful but pretty short-lived. Jump to 1664, and 4 English warships just roll into the harbor. The Dutch were heavily outgunned, and they pragmatically surrendered without firing a single shot. The English immediately renamed the colony New York. Now, aside from a brief little hiccup in 1673 when the Dutch actually took it back and called it New Orange, the Treaty of Westminster in 1674 made it permanently New York. Under British rule, commerce absolutely exploded, and it quickly became the crown jewel of North American ports.
But look, we really have to grapple with the dark truth behind all that commercial explosion. 20%. By the 1740s, enslaved African people made up an entire fifth of New York's population. Slavery was deeply, deeply embedded in the city's economy, right from its earliest Dutch days. And these enslaved individuals literally built the foundational infrastructure of the city. We're talking about clearing the roads, constructing the homes, and even building the defensive wall that gave Wall Street its name. It's an absolutely crucial piece of the city's foundation that we just cannot overlook.
As tensions with Britain boiled over, New York turned into a revolutionary crucible. In 1776, General George Washington suffered a massive defeat at the Battle of Long Island. He had to pull off this desperate evacuation under the cover of fog just to save his army. What followed was a brutal 7-year British military occupation. But New York survived, and in 1785 it emerges the very first capital of the young United States. But how on earth did the city manage the explosive population growth that followed the war? Well, enter the 1811 grid plan. This was a brutally pragmatic, totally efficient rectangular design. The planners basically just ignored the natural hills, leveled the terrain, and buried the ancient streams to pave the way for endless real estate development. Coupled with the opening of the Erie Canal in 1825, which connected the Atlantic to the American Midwest, New York's commerce went through the roof. The physical future of the city was, quite literally, set in stone.
Great immigrant gateway. The world comes to New York. Now, the Erie Canal made New York rich, but immigration? Immigration made it legendary. In the 19th century, massive waves of Irish escaping famine and Germans seeking freedom just flooded in, and they were quickly followed by Italians, Greeks, and Eastern European Jews. 12 million. 12 million people passed through the Immigration Processing Center at Ellis Island between 1892 and 1954, all searching for a new life. Just to put that into perspective for you, roughly 40% of all Americans alive today can trace at least one ancestor back to Ellis Island. It's incredible. the city rapidly transformed into an astonishing 18-language melting pot. But we have to ground these staggering statistics in real human grit. It's perfectly captured by Emma Lazarus's famous poem etched into the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. These immigrants, they definitely didn't find streets paved with gold. What they found were disease-ridden 10 by 10 foot tenement apartments in places like the Lower East Side, often with no running water and barely any air. Yet through pure, unbelievable resilience, they survived. They laid the bricks, they dug the subway tunnels, and they built the towering infrastructure of the modern city with their bare hands. Racing toward the sky, the 1920s skyscraper wars.
So, in 1898, the city consolidated the 5 boroughs into the massive municipality that we know today. And by the turn of the century, they were completely running out of room on the island of Manhattan. So, New York stopped growing out and started growing up. Aided by newly invented steel frame construction and safe passenger elevators, the 1920s brought this fierce skyscraper fever. It was basically a massive battle of architectural egos. The architects of 40 Wall Street actually thought they'd won the title of the world's tallest building in 1930. But the architect of the Chrysler Building had secretly constructed a 185-foot spire inside the building's crown. Once 40 Wall Street was finished, the Chrysler Building hoisted its spire into place, totally blindsiding its competitors and stealing the crown. It's just a fantastic micro-narrative of classic New York ambition.
Well, listen, the Chrysler Building's victory lasted barely a year before it was dethroned by a true titan, the Empire State Building. Built right during the depths of the Great Depression, the speed of its construction was just mind-boggling. They were averaging 4.5 stories completed every single week, using 57,000 tons of riveted steel. The whole shebang was finished in an unbelievable 13 months. Though, ironically, because of the Depression, it opened to mostly empty offices. Locals actually used to mark it by calling it the Empty State Building.
The city that never sleeps, a century of resilience.
By the mid-20th century, New York had fully elevated itself to become the world's economic engine and cultural capital. The 1904 opening of the subway system was like this circulatory system that connected the 5 boroughs into a single, massive, breathing organism. But the modern era also brought dramatic highs and devastating lows. After the post-WW2 boom, the 1970s brought horrific urban decay, near bankruptcy, and that infamous 1977 blackout that sparked citywide rioting. A lot of people actually declared the city dead, but of course it came back. Then came the unthinkable tragedy of 9/11 in 2001, which tested the very soul of the city. Yet again, New York rebuilt, proudly raising One World Trade Center into the sky. And later, in 2012, Hurricane Sandy brought billions in damage, forcing the city to adapt all over again to a changing climate. The unyielding resilience of this metropolis is the only constant. It gets knocked down, and it just constantly reinvents itself. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. In a city that has completely overwritten itself 1,000 times, from a glacier, to a forest, to a Dutch trading post, to a skyline of steel, what in the world will New York look like in the next 400 years? The only guarantee is that it will change, and it will endure. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the history beneath your feet.